Morning. How many laws do you think that you and I live under? I got a little curious and did an internet search. How many laws are there in the United States? The short answer is no one knows. It may actually be literally impossible to count them all. When it comes to the Bible, well, we tend to think first of the 10 really big ones, right? Don't commit idolatry or take God's name in vain. Honor your father and mother and keep the Sabbath day. Don't lie or steal or kill or commit adultery. Don't covet what your neighbor has. But of course, there's way more laws and regulations than that. People have counted them up in the Old Testament and come up with 613. People always say that like it's so many, but we have more than 613 laws and regulations about ketchup. So I don't know if it's that many, but the early Christians had to figure out which ones did or did not apply, which were just for Israel and which applied to all disciples of Jesus. And then they ended up with some new ones behind. Bottom line is, it can feel like a lot. There's a lot of rules in life. And there's a lot of rules in our religion. Got to go to Mass every weekend, and don't forget the holy days of obligation, all the limitations on what you say and don't say, how you treat and use your body. Got to pray and got to read your Bible, got to share with the less fortunate. Could go on a lot, right? And these are all important, and that's the rub. None of them are just dispensable. None of them are really trivial. But when we're trying to stay on top of all the musts and mustn'ts of life, whether it's in religion or anything else, it's so easy we can lose sight of the big picture. And there is a big picture. And that's the question that Jesus is answering in today's gospel. All the commandments, all the rules, big and small, that God gives us are all about the same two things: loving God and loving our neighbor. That's it. Everything else flows out of that. And if we want to live a healthy Christian religious life, it's so critical, it's absolutely vital that we have to get that. We have to get it like deep down in our hearts, in our guts, that all of God's commandments to us are about love. Now, the dumb way to take this is to say, well, okay, so then we can throw out all of the wisdom and teaching of the ages, and I can sort of do whatever I want as long as I feel loving about it, That's a disaster. It doesn't work. It might seem like a relief to think that. It might be a popular sermon. I've heard that one given, to say, look, everybody, we're into Jesus, not some long, stupid list of rules. So just relax and just love, And by love, of course, we mean just having a vaguely groovy attitude towards people. Maybe unless they don't vote like you. Surely that wouldn't be required, but no, you can't get that from the Bible. That's not Christian charity. And that message, no matter how much it might tickle our ears and no matter how often it might get retweeted and applauded, it doesn't actually help people because it doesn't work. When Jesus says that all the commandments depend on love, that doesn't mean they don't matter. It's just the opposite. It means that breaking them is failing to love, right? If God's commandments depend on love, then ignoring them isn't just a matter of having broken some stupid arbitrary rule. It's a matter of failing to love. And with some commandments, it's obvious to see why. It's so easy to see that racism is a failure to love. That gossip is a failure to love. That exclusion and cliques are failures to love. Other times, maybe the connection isn't quite so obvious to us. I think right away of the few Catholics who have taken the trouble to understand and accept the Church's teaching on contraception. They've come to understand and accept it because they've come to understand how it's about true and complete love. What about, is it a failure of love to skip Mass in ordinary times? Sure it is. Sure it is. What about right now, when the bishops are saying come or don't come, while there's a pandemic fight going on. Are they saying it doesn't matter anymore? No, they're telling us as a family that taking care of each other and loving our neighbor might, for some of us, mean staying home right now. But it's still about the same thing. The first reading from Exodus gets into the weeds, into the details about our economic lives. And that has to be about love too. Above all, the way we respond to the poor. Among the examples that Moses is giving, he talks about the man who has to give his only warm cloak as collateral on a loan, which invokes this tragic reality that the more poor someone is, the more vulnerable they are to being exploited and taken advantage of, right? Because they're desperate. I've never had to think about going for like some kind of super high interest predatory loan just to survive. I've never had to work in an unsafe job or for exploitative wages. I've never had to put up with gross and creepy comments just because I was so desperate that I couldn't say no or couldn't risk rocking the boat. For lots of people, that's every day they work. And if we take advantage of others this way, Exodus says, it's to sign up for the wrath of God. He hears the cry of the poor. So the way we treat people in need, and even the way we handle business and trade, and the way we approach, the way we relate to friends and family and strangers, and the kinds of things we talk about, and the way we spend our leisure time, I mean, our relationship with Christ should be affecting all of this, right? We want him to be Lord of all of our lives. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. In other words, love God with everything. Don't hold anything back. And then love your neighbor as yourself. Now, most days, we keep those two big commandments in 1,000 little ways that might seem little to us, but from an eternal perspective, they're not. They're not little at all. Saint Therese called it her little way to do small things with great love. And when it's bedtime and you think back over your day, I hope you'll be able to say that summed it up, that you did small things with great love. Of course, once in a while, the things aren't small. It can almost come as a surprise for people when suddenly following Christ and keeping the commandments of God is going to be quite hard on you. Maybe it'll cost you a lot of money to do it, or maybe it means you can't do something you really want to do. Maybe it'll lose you a relationship that's going to hurt badly. And then you have a choice. You can say, well, this is a stupid rule, and I don't see the point of it, and I'm going to do what I want because I'm a pretty good person and I mean well. Or you can say, this is my chance to really love God with all my heart. Our own sister Kathleen and sisters Barbara Ann, Shirley, Joelle, and Agnes followed this path from start to finish. What else would make them join the convent? What else would make them show up in Liberia? We call the vowed religious sisters brides of Christ. Sister Kathleen, like any bride, she didn't know what exactly the future held in store. She just knew she was committed to this love wherever it led, like any bride, all the way to its fulfillment 28 years ago, Friday, the 23rd. And that path led her to some beautiful and bright places, and it led to some painful and dark places. Something like a civil war in Liberia is just a news story to most of us most of the time. But for the sisters, it was something that was happening to the people that they were loving as themselves. And when the time came for a big decision, they chose to stay by the side of the people they were loving as themselves. To love God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. That is our religion in 19 words. That's it. It sounds so simple. And then it turns out to be messy and complicated when you actually try to do it, which is why there's a lot more words than 19. But they all boil down to those. Love doesn't mind. Love doesn't mind messy and complicated. It just wants to walk with you, to be at your side, to keep making the decisions that will be best for you. Like our Martyrs of Charity, it just wants to stay with the people you're called to love and serve, and to stay with Jesus himself. If we really make our religion about loving God and neighbor, everything changes. And it doesn't get easier, it gets harder, right? Because religion that's about following the rules is religion that always ends up focusing on the minimum. It becomes about, and you see this all the time, it becomes about, what do I have to do to not go to hell? And we approach everything in that minimalist spirit. And when we get in that mindset, all we're interested in is that minimum. What you want to know from the church is really, how low can you set the bar and get away with it? What do I have to do? And that attitude, when it sneaks in, it makes you laser focused on the rules. And once you're satisfied that you're doing whatever minimum you've decided is going to keep you out of hell, the sad truth is, and you'd never say this out loud and you wouldn't consciously think it, but the truth is, you have no further use for Jesus Christ. Everything changes when you make it about what it's really about, love of God and your neighbor. Because love never asks, what's the least I can do? It's just not a question that occurs. Love never approaches the commandments like minimum standards to not go to hell, but as unending challenges to grow in virtue every day. How faithful can I be? How true to my vows and commitments? How pure of heart? How honest? How chaste can I be? How grateful can I be? How free of attachments to material things can I be? How perfectly and freely can I offer my share in the cross of Christ? How much can I give? How many people can I touch? How much witness can I give? There's no end to those. And one thing that you don't get that way is a kind of shallow complacency that you've met whatever bar you've set for yourself, and since you're pretty sure God wouldn't send you to hell for anything you're doing, then, mission accomplished, and you can make the rest of your life about seeking distraction from the incredible dullness of a life that isn't about love. Another thing you don't get that way is the religious terror of setting the bar really high and then living in fear of going to hell because you're not living up to it. What you do get is to wake up every day knowing that there's an adventure in front of you that you will never exhaust. Knowing that life is about something amazing. And knowing the joy of never giving up, trying to love God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your mind, and loving your neighbor as yourself. That's our religion in 19 words.